I'm literally at work, but I just can't stop thinking about what I heard on LBC and the changes that are going to be made. I know they're going to happen in 2025, so I just want to give a warning out to home educators or people that want to home educate their children about what is coming. So today is the 17th of December, and there is a strong court case happening about a little girl who was murdered by her parents, which is devastating and absolutely terrifying. But I just feel as though the government are using that as an initiative to really crack down on home educators. So in this video, I will be discussing my thoughts on that whole thing and explaining what's coming and what you need to be aware of if you're preparing to home educate in 2025. So I'll see you at home. Okay, hi guys, so I'm home, so let's get straight into the video. Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how stressed I was at work today. Just on my way to work this morning, listening to LBC. I've obviously been listening to LBC quite a few, like during the week. I was going to call up so many times, but my battery died one of the days, and then I just kept missing the time to call them. So I was just at work just thinking about this a lot. Obviously I work in a school, work 3 days a week in a school, and obviously I work within the home education community on the other day, just trying to support families as much as I can, because it's not easy out here, you know what I mean? And things have really changed post-COVID, basically. But today, I know the government have been talking a lot about introducing measures that will require parents to obtain permission. Can you believe it? Permission to home educate their own children. I'm not into that. I don't think it's fair that you have to ask someone to home educate your children. If you've already chosen that you don't think schools are working for your child, I'm just a big believer that it should be a choice. It should be a choice that's given to a parent. In the same way that parents that can choose to send their children to boarding school, obviously they have money. Some parents choose to send their children to private schools. Some parents choose to send their children to Steiner schools, Froebel schools, Montessori schools, different type of schools. I think they should have the right to home educate their children too. It's just another means of educating their children. I think there's a war against non-traditional types of schooling, basically, with this, because many home educators that are teaching their children are not doing it in the typical way, and I don't think the government really likes that, but I don't really know why. I'm not really there yet in terms of my research to understand why they don't want children to be taught in a different way. Now, we know that there's several different philosophies out there that parents want to use to teach their children. There's many parents that send their children to public school, do we call it public school over here? To mainstream schools that maybe are not very happy with the care system, but they have no way out, and they just feel like this is just what they've got to do, and they kind of hope that maybe one day it will work, or they don't really want to have their children all day at home with them. So they're quite happy for that method of their children going to school from 8:30 in the morning, 8:45 in the morning, finishing school at 3 o'clock, 3:15 in the afternoon, and having that routine. And there's nothing wrong with that. But again, it's down to choice. I think schools should be seen as a choice that parents can have to send their children to school if they choose to. That's my big belief, and that's weird maybe coming from a teacher's point of view, but I think it should be a choice. I think if a parent chooses to home educate their children, they should do it well. And obviously, safeguarding issues are safeguarding issues, and there's something that needs to be addressed. There's something that is fundamentally damaging to children. And then there's home education, which is a style of education. And I just feel as though I want to push back a little bit at what I've been hearing on the radio, what I'm hearing people saying about the safety of home education. I think the narrative about safety in home education needs to change. That's the main thing that I'm grappling with today. That's the main thing that I have issues with today. And I just feel really sorry for the parent who wants to home educate their children and are thinking about doing it for 2025, because I believe that if this legislation passes through government at the stages, goes through all the stages without significant delays, a lot of things are going to change in 2025 in terms of how home education is done in the UK. And the reason why some people might be very optimistic about it, but I've seen so many changes happen already that I'm just like, what is going on? So I'm really getting into politics now. I never used to be into politics as much as I am now. And I've learned things like you know what, it's so embarrassing. I didn't really know what far right meant and what far left meant and what left meant and centre left and all these things until maybe the last 12 months or something. My daughter does politics within her school, and I've been listening to her and getting her to teach me things, because children can teach your parents stuff too. And I've just been really involved in what is going on with the whole Tommy Robinson case, looking at the whole riots that took place in London. There's marches outside London all the time, with Palestine and the people that believe, in support of Palestine, people that in support of Israel. There's so many issues that's going on in the streets. It would be wild not to get involved in politics. And I think also because we had our elections this year as well, so I got involved in that and think about who I was going to vote for and things like that. And obviously with Donald Trump coming into power and everything that's changing within the American system, I've just been really involved in it. And I think also because Christian Concern had something about education revolution in April, and there were some political themes that were discussed there. And I'm like, wow, this is actually really interesting. And then also I've seen how it affects me, like so much at different seasons in your life. I remember under a Labour government, my children, you know, I was quite happy under a Labour government when I was having children. I thought they were quite good in terms of the sure starts that they did. And they gave a trust fund voucher that every child got. Where they had like a £250 voucher you could put inside your bank account, and it would grow within the account. And I felt like I was quite supported under a Labour government. I'm not sure if it's the same type as it was then, but it feels very, very different. Now, I've been affected so much by the new government. Things like buying my council house, like I've been, you know, those of you that have been following my channel for a while, my biggest dream has always been to buy my council house. Now, I gave up my career to home educate my children. So I'm one of those mums who, you know, they'll probably deem as underprivileged or in poverty or whatever it is you want to call it, in terms of the stigma. That's not what my Jesus says I am, but in terms of the world, what they would say about a family member. If you took away the teacher part, if I wasn't here as a qualified teacher, I'll be classed as just a single mother that's trying to home educate her children, because that's what a lot of people say about single mothers home educating their children. But because I'm a qualified teacher, it kind of gives me that, elevates me to a level of respect that people want to respect me more because I'm a teacher, which I don't agree with. Again, I believe that you don't have to be a teacher to home educate your children. I've met wonderful parents along the way that have educated their children and have not been qualified teachers, but I'm deemed as that person. So in a minute, I'm going to go through some reasons as to why the government wants to introduce these measures and my views on that. But the point I'm trying to make, going back to my point, I always like go too far, I can't find my way back. Let me try and find my way back. I think I was saying that, how I've been affected by the government. So one thing is down to the 20% tax for private schools. My daughter goes to a private school, and I've been really worried about how the 20% tax might affect her. Luckily, it comes into effect when she's leaving her private school, so it's not going to affect me too much, which is good. And I can talk about that more when she's left the school, because there's other things there that I want to, talk about. But that hasn't affected us as much. But I've seen many schools that have been affected by the 20% VAT rise. Many Christian schools are closing down that are really in need of prayer, because many Christian schools are not going by standardized assessments. Many families put their children in Christian schools because they want them to have a Christian education, so they may not be the most affluent or the most well off in terms of money, but the families are just trying really hard to give their kids a Christian education, because we know that in mainstream schools, secular education is what runs the narrative more than Christian education. But a lot of those schools are closing down, which is really sad. Not just Christian schools, a lot of other schools are closing as well, because it's just not viable anymore with the cost, and things like national insurance rises for paying for your staff members, tax rises, just so much things going on that people have had to close, which is really sad. I've also been affected by, I was saying about my council house, I've been affected by my council house because they've taken away a big chunk of the money that people had before to be able to buy the house. So for me, we've been living here for a very long time, that I was entitled to about £138,000 as a discount to go towards the house. I'm going through, I did put my application form in time, so I'm hoping that will pass so we can buy our council house. But again, many people are not going to have the opportunity anymore, because that's significantly reduced by you lost about £100,000 if you haven't bought your council house. So please pray for me that will go through, because I really do want to buy the house. I put my career on hold when I home educated my children in 2013. I gave up a job that I was earning $33,000 to $35,000 a year because my children weren't happy in school, and I felt that as their mother, I'm the one, me, not the school, I'm the one that can make my children happy. So I gave up that stability of work, took my children out of school and started my own company, like doing tuition part-time, under 1.4 teacher, which helped us get to where we needed to. I didn't have the most amount of money. I was earning less there than I was earning when I was at school, but I had the freedom to be able to be with my children, which is what I wanted. Parenting goes like that in a blink of an eye. So if you're not happy with your 9 to 5, mine was more like 6 to 7. It felt like, but I wasn't happy with my day-to-day, 5 days a week, working with other people's children and not having much time to be with my own children, finding it hard to do their homework with them, because obviously by the time you get home, you want to get them bathed, get ready for bed, talk to them a little bit, maybe read the Bible, before, you had to send them back to school the next day. And that kind of cycle every day, 5 days a week with young children can be quite hard for many families, especially when you're a single mother and you're the main person building up their income. And then also as a single parent too, you've got to then give your children away on the weekends to their father, if you are in a situation where you're able to do that. But then it means that you've only got 2 weekends a week, 2 weekends a month with your children, and you're trying to fit as much of those things in. So just having children, I'm not moaning about this right now, my kids are older now, but I'm just remembering the stuff that I had to go through when I was working. So in the end, my kids were not happy. I had to keep sending them to school. I was sending them to school unhappy, called up the school, getting the school to check up on my kids because I felt like they were unhappy. then the school would look at me like, okay, something wrong with your children, are you hiding something? And they weren't really willing to help you, but they're willing to just look and scrutinise and be a big brother for your children. I remember, like, I'm not going to go into too much detail for my own children's safeguarding, because I care about safeguarding, but there's so much issues that were taking place. I was like, I'll try and go to school to get support, because I knew that I'm working in a school. I'm leaving my house at 7 o'clock in the morning to bring my children to breakfast club, childminders, friend's house, different things like that, to send my kids to school, even though I know they're not happy, because I need to earn an income, my kids need to have an education, and then I'd be picking my kids up from school at maybe 5 o'clock, 5:30, bring them home, trying to cook food if I hadn't planned it the night before, getting their school clothes washed, getting their school clothes ironed, listening to them, talking about their day, trying to mark my work, trying to plan my lessons for the next day, and doing it again Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It just didn't work for us. And I think for my children, like for my older boy in particular, it didn't work for him. And I remember like taking him out of school. I'm not going to go for my whole story in this video, but you can kind of look back at some of my videos to find out more about it, or join my community where I go a lot more in depth. But I remember taking him out of school and being really happy that we were free. And it worked for us. We were like, it was such a successful thing for us. But in 2025, many parents are not going to have that same choice that I had, because the government are putting all these restrictions on them and trying to make them into criminals, it feels like, because they want to home educate their children. So in this video, that's quite a long introduction, but in this video I'm just going to talk to you about a few points as to why I don't think this register is fair, and just some of the things you need to be aware of if you want to home educate your children in 2025. So I'm going to read from my computer as well. The UK government is introducing measures that will require certain parents to obtain permission before they can home educate their children. Specifically, parents who are under investigation by social services or have children on protection plans. They will no longer have the automatic right, I'm not smiling really, have the automatic right to home educate their children. This initiative aims to safeguard vulnerable children and ensure they receive appropriate education and care. Now, it all sounds fine, it all sounds like, fine and dandy, like, yeah, it makes sense, but I'm going to go into some of the reasons as to why that still doesn't make sense. In addition to these measures, the government plans to implement statutory registers for children not in school. Again, I think there's already something like this, because when your children are not in school, you're supposed to write to your head teacher. You can quote the Education Act 1996, and you let them know that you're going to take on full responsibility of your children. So if you haven't done that, then your children should really be registered within a school. And I understand that totally, unless they're talking about children who have never been to school. So sometimes a mother might have her baby in a hospital and just continue just teaching her child at home, as she's been doing from the very, very beginning, and then never go to school. Maybe they're the children that the government now wants to find out what they're doing. I know many families like that have never put their children to school. They just never went to school because they don't believe in that. They've got a different lifestyle. They use home education as a way of living, and they teach their children along the way. But it looks like the government wants to stop that now as well. So these registers are intended to help local authorities identify and support home educated children, ensuring they receive a suitable education. Now, how are they going to do that? How are they going to ensure that they're receiving a suitable education? And what is deemed as a suitable education? Because obviously non-conformist or non-traditional education may not be deemed as suitable. These changes come amid a significant increase in homeschooling in England. Recent data indicates a 21% rise in the number of homeschooled children. I don't like the word homeschooled either. It should be home-educated children, because we don't do school at home. We educate our children as a lifestyle. But there has been a 21% rise in the number of homeschooled children over the past year, with figures reaching 111,700 as of autumn 2024. That is a lot of children, a lot of families home educating their children. But the question really should be, why? Why are people putting their children outside of school? Concerns have been raised that some families feel compelled to choose home education due to unmet needs within the school system rather than making a truly elective choice. That is based on the Times, what they've said, and the government's efforts aim to balance the right to home educate with the need to protect children's welfare and ensure access to quality education. We're going to deal with this in a minute, okay? So, some of the reasons, I'm going to give you some reasons, I think there's about 12 reasons here as to why the government are saying that these people need to ask permission for home educating their children. You will notice within this, a lot of these things have got safeguarding themes in them. So I'm not going to comment on each and every one, because obviously every case is very, very different. Obviously safeguarding is a really important issue, but let's just go through what they are. I'm just going to run through them very quickly, and then I'm going to tell you my views at the end. So number one, parents under investigation by social services. For example, a parent is facing allegations of neglect and abuse, may have an ongoing investigation by social services. So under the new rules, they will need special permission to home educate their child. I was one of these parents, because they were worried that my child, because of all of his emotional needs, they wanted to check if he was going through any neglect, because the school was complaining that he kept running indoors and hiding underneath the table. In year 5, he was writing notes and putting it inside the prayer box at the school, and the school uses a prayer box as as a social service, not social service, as a safeguarding network where the teacher would read the prayers for the children and then, use that as safeguarding issues. That my children went to a Church of England school a little while ago. But yeah, so I was under that. I was under investigation just to make sure that they were fine. Obviously, the investigation concluded and they realised that my children were fine, but I still was going through investigations for that. They wanted to speak to my doctor, they wanted to come into my house, they wanted to do all these things to find out if I was doing anything wrong with my children. And I wasn't, basically. But I wouldn't have been allowed to home educate my children under that. Parents of children on child protection plans. Parents with a history of educational neglect. This is basically a parent that previously failed to provide a suitable education to their child, leading to truancy or developmental delays. Or it could be a parent that hasn't really done the child's homework at school, or the school has been like monitoring that family and felt as though they didn't work in partnership with the school very well. They might have to get special permission. Parents involved in domestic violence cases. Parents with criminal backgrounds related to child welfare. Parents in financial or housing instability. Again, that I fit into that category because I was basically someone that didn't have my own home. No, I didn't actually. No. I had my own home by the time I homeschooled the kids, but I had gone through periods of homelessness with my children or been in temporary accommodation with my children. But under these new rules, I would have to ask for special permission to home educate my children. They say that schools provide routine, structure and access to meals and resources that may not be available at home. Now, I remember when my children went to school, I had to pay £2 a day for them to eat meals at school, which was quite tough within itself. I know some schools I don't know if it's all schools, but I know some schools provide a free meal to children now, which I think is a really wonderful initiative. But there are some of the reasons as to why the government are saying that those families would need to have a register to get permission to home educate their children. Now, today, the 17th of December 2024, there was a tragic case involving a child called Sarah Sharif. She was a 10-year-old girl from Woking, Surrey, and she had been abused by her dad and her stepmom, and they killed her, basically. She was withdrawn from school from her father in April 2023, and she died in August 2023. So that means that she was basically home educated, as they say, for 4 months. Now, do they include the 6 weeks holiday in that? Because most children would be off school for those 6 weeks holidays. So had they not removed her from school in the April, she would have basically been outside for maybe 2.5 months. That's part of the reason why they're saying that, their intention to homeschool became a problem because it gave less scrutiny for the schools, basically. But here's the thing. Sarah, she had been known to social services beforehand, and the school had already had warnings and complaints about her, and they reported things like starvation. They thought that she was deprived of adequate nutrition for extended periods. I'm just making sure I got the information correctly. She suffered severe injuries, including burns, bites, beatings. Notably, she was beaten with a cricket bat, leading to her death. Now, this is traumatizing, and it's absolutely so sad, like what happened to her. She could be one of my students. I teach that age group myself, so everything that happened to her is very, very sickening, and it shouldn't happen to anybody. So these things are really sad because they are safeguarding issues, though. That's the only thing that I want to say. So I don't really want to comment on her case too much, but the point of it is that it is a safeguarding issue rather than a home education issue. She was also known to social services. She was in school prior, and I think these complaints had gone on for maybe 2 years or so. And still, nothing. She was under the scrutiny of schools. They were able to see her, but she went through. Apparently, she was going through this for about 2 years, if I've got the information correctly. But even though the schools had so much concerns, unfortunately, she still fell through the system. So it's almost like home educators are being punished for the failings of Surrey Council for their safeguarding policies. So it just says that reports indicate that social services had previously been aware of the family. Concerns were raised regarding Sarah's well-being, particularly before she was withdrawn from school. Her teachers had flagged worries about her appearance, her injuries and her overall behaviour. Teachers had noticed signs of neglect and abuse while Sarah was still attending school. So these things happened while she was still attending school. This included visible injuries that raised suspicions, promoting them to escalate concerns to authorities. So she was escalated to authorities that she was already known. Shortly after these concerns were noted, Sarah's parents withdrew her from school, citing plans to home educate her. Now, this is where they're just jumping on the home education bit, and that is why we're all going to be affected from it. Not from the fact that, children, she was in school, known to her school, known to social services, and not enough was done during that period of time too. So you have to bear that in mind. But her case has sparked widespread concern about gaps in the system, particularly around home education and with vulnerable children. because they're saying that they can disappear without oversight. That's not true, because children at home educators can still have scrutiny by social services. They still can go on child in need plans. They still can go on child protection plans. The law doesn't change just because they're home educated. So social workers are still able to investigate cases whether the child is in school or not in school, because safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. One interesting fact as well is that in 2022, the number of referrals from schools to children's services in England rose by over 50%. That's around COVID time, which reached 129,090 in the year ending March 2022. So there was already loads of people referring children for safeguarding issues. So Bridget Phillipson has proposed landmark legislation that could drastically change home education rights. If councils suspect safeguarding issues, parents will now need consent to educate their children at home. But the question I have is, who decides? Who decides what counts as a safeguarding concern? Because obviously if anyone just decides that, it's a safeguarding concern, the parent will have to go through an investigation anyway. I think 1 in 10 children are currently being, it's about 1 in 10 children in a typical classroom of 30 that are investigated for safeguarding concerns. Something doesn't always come out of it, but you have to investigate every safeguarding concern. And the question really is, are we punishing families who are already struggling? Because many families who are choosing to home educate their children pull them out because they feel as though the system failed them. So I think most of these things are already happening. The only time, maybe that child is not registered is a child who maybe has been home educated from birth. Safeguarding and home education are different anyway, but within safeguarding there's still room for support for some families. Obviously if there's issues like abuse and harm and things like that, we have to make sure that those children are protected. I totally agree with that. High profile cases like the ones I just listed, I think they're used to justify restrictions on home education. And I just feel like using these high profile situations to generalise the main public or the main people that are home educating their children, it just seems unfair. Also, when I look at the data and look at the legislation, look at the things that are coming out in the news and on LBC and people talking about it, it's almost like there's a failure to acknowledge that school-based safeguarding failures happen too. I feel like schools are often painted as the only safe place for children, and the home is painted as the unsafe place for children, which again is not fair. It's not true. It's not the only place, The home should be the most safe place for the children. Obviously, things don't always go well in people's homes as well. We know that already. But I feel as though they just said that schools are the most safe place. Many schools and many teachers are doing a wonderful job, but it doesn't mean that schools are the only safe place for a child to go. And some schools are not safe places for children to go also. Some children face things like abuse at school. Some children face things like neglect at school or bullying at school or the wrong handling from a teacher within the school. Some schools are not designed very well to cater for the needs of children within a school, such as children with certain types of special educational needs. Some schools are so overworked and underfinanced that they're unable to support those children within the school, and some parents feel as though the system's failed them and they pull the children out of school as a way of seeking an alternative to what wasn't working in the first place. So when we focus on home education, it kind of ignores the failures of safeguarding in the first place. Parents that are already known to social services or are being investigated as a child in need, they're automatically viewed as being incapable of providing education. But you have to understand that some families that interact with social services, some of them do it on their own accord. Some people will reach out to social services for support because social services are supposed to be there to support the family. But if they're being constantly scrutinised or being treated like Big Brother, many families will withdraw from that and they will not try to access the support from these services that they should be able to access because they're worried about being penalised because of the support. Such things could be like mental health challenges. Maybe a mother is going through some kind of anxiety or some kind of depression, but that is seen as something so big that that the school might say, okay, that parent needs to take their child to school. Maybe a parent has reached out for support for counselling or different things. You don't know. People go through so many things, such as bereavements or loss of relationship. Does that mean that they have to, that they don't necessarily have the right to home educate children? Maybe somebody might be saying, yes, it does. Somebody might just feel like, yes, it does mean that, because obviously the parent has got depression or some kind of mental health challenges, and maybe they should just put them in school. But it doesn't always work like that. I've gone through periods of sadness in my life that just said, we have different seasons. There might be a really good season where everything's going really well for you, but you might go through a negative season as well, and you have to draw upon people that you know. Many people might draw upon their community, their pastors, their friends, their family for that support for that little short time, and they still need to be around their children. Maybe the homeschooling gets their mind off things in the first place. I'm not saying that parents shouldn't be able to have support when they need it, but my point remains, should that mean that they can't teach their children at home? Other reasons, some parents might go to social services or local services because they need help. Like, just imagine you go to a food bank to get dinner for your children. Does that mean that you shouldn't be able to home educate your child? If your child attends school and you still go to a food bank, what is the difference with that one? Also, with the high profile case that we just had, like the child was home educated for maybe 2.5 months, I'd say, because I'm not going to include the 6-week holiday. But my point is that if something happened to a child, hopefully not, but if something happened during the weekend, does that mean that we need to ban the weekend? Because obviously there was no scrutiny for the child over the weekend. If something happened to the child during Easter or over the Christmas period, which lasts about 2 to 3 weeks, does that mean that we need to start banning Easter and school holidays and make the child be in school all the time? If something happened to a child over the 6-week holiday, does that mean that we need to ban 6-week holiday because, you know, that child was not able to be scrutinised or, you know, out of the protection of the school for that 6 weeks? Now, I have to be very careful with my words. I'm not trying to say that things should happen to children. Of course they shouldn't. But my point remains that when it happens to like one person or a child, we need to look at the issue at hand. And what needs to be looked at is Surrey Council, Surrey's safeguarding policies, other safeguarding policies around how you can support families that are in these situations. But it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has to be generalised because of all these issues and these failures that have taken place within those schools and within the social services, basically. There's also a bias against non-traditional education. Some people choose to send their children to boarding school if they have the money for it, or, you know, that's what they've chosen for their child. Some people choose private education for their children, which is also something that the government has been attacking with the 20% tax rises, VAT rises on these schools. Many Christian schools have closed down because obviously parents can't afford to send their children to school anymore. Many Christian schools are not selective, but parents are choosing to pay the extra money because they want their child to have a Christian education, but now they've got to send their children back into mainstream education or try to homeschool them themselves. There are so many reasons. Some people send their kids to Montessori schools or Steiner schools, or, you know, there's just so much different philosophies out there that don't run by the same traditional method. Now, my children, when they were home educated, used a curriculum called the Accelerated Christian Education curriculum, which is not the traditional type of schooling, but they did really well on that curriculum. And had we not been allowed to do that, I don't know how well they would have done. I think that home education is often compared unfairly to school education. People talk a lot about socialisation because they want them to go through the norms and go through what is the regular way to go. Children are still socialised, but in a very, very different way. Some families don't want their child to be socialised with children of their same age because people feel like, okay, this is what I did as a child, so my children should do it too. But then at the same time, many of the parents have been to school for 14 years of their life. They went to school from the age of 4 years old until the age of 18 years old, and we're still saying to those parents that you cannot actually teach your children. If they can't teach their children, but they've been in the system for 14 years, then what have they been learning over the 14 years? If the education within schools is so amazing and so brilliant, why is it that we think that parents do not have any knowledge in their mind to be able to home educate their children when they've been in the system for 14 years? And if that's the case, why would somebody want to put their child back into a system that failed them over those 14 years? Why is it that a child might go to school for 12 years from the age of 4 to 16 years old and then leave school at 16 years old with a certificate that says whether they failed or they passed? What is happening within the education system? It makes no sense. Obviously, a qualified teacher might be able to teach a class of 30 because they've been trained to teach a class of 30. They've been, learning about like child development or ways of delivering a curriculum to them. But that's like at a higher level, you see, like in a higher level by getting a degree. But I just believe that if someone has been in the education system for so long, they should be able to teach another child. I know that my children, I would be able to give them a business right now. They can set up a business themselves as tutors themselves because the knowledge that they had in their home education means they can pass that knowledge on to other children through being a tutor. My oldest boy, Enriquez, when he went to university his first year, I made him tutor some of my students at 19 years old because he had a lot of information that he'd learned. He knew a lot about GCSEs, he knew a lot about AO1s and AO2s and AO3s, which is like a criteria that used in A-levels and different exams, that he was able to pass on that knowledge to other children. It makes no sense that you could be in the system for 14 years and have nothing to pass on to your children, and people don't even expect you to have anything to pass on to your children. It makes no sense. And if you can't, like I said, if you can't do that, then why would you want to be a part of it? Again, it makes no sense. We need a better quality of education out there, then maybe less people will be pulling their kids out of school, maybe. Another thing, with the new register that could be coming into effect, I feel like it gives an unhealthy bias for more privileged families that have money. It says things like, if they're going for homelessness, don't have like their own home or security, they will penalise that parent from home educating their children. So it sounds as though only the elite, only the people that, have lots of money or have a really good job that can afford to pay tutors to home educate their children. That's what the typical type of home education looks like that the government wants for their children. But there are many families out there that have homeschooled for free or for very cheap, and maybe some parents went through the 14 years of education themselves and didn't come out with a qualification, and they've had to learn alongside their child, which I've heard of before as well, where parents have actually studied alongside their child, and when the child has gone to take a GCSE, the parent has too. So they've kind of learned it together. You know what I mean? There's so many different ways of home educating their kids, but it just feels as though if you're from a disadvantaged, lower income family, you may be stopped from home educating your children because of that. There is also a lack of evidence linking home education to safeguarding issues. Governments imply that home education is linked to safeguarding failures without strong data to support this claim. There's been no comprehensive studies that prove that home educated children face more risks than school children. There's no studies out there that I've known, and I've been researching to find out if there has been a study that shows that. I just feel that introducing laws based on assumptions rather than evidence is just so unjust. I think to punish families for system failures, again, is a wrong move. Families may be forced into home education for many of the things I spoke about before, such as special educational needs. There's things like bullying, there's things like poor school conditions, because not all schools are very, very good. Many schools have to go through different criteria of whether they're outstanding, good, or requires improvement. If you have a child going to a school that maybe requires improvement, is that the top standard of education that you want to give to your children? If there's no other schools in your area and you know that you can do it better, then shouldn't you be allowed to do that? I just think that the whole thing, it just paints a negative picture of home education, and the more that we talk about the negatives, the more that we're not really seeing a clearer picture of what is actually going on, why there are over 100,000 people in the UK that are putting their children out of school. We need to hear more stories from families that are doing it and doing it well. We need to see, hold the government account for things like safeguarding issues that are taking place in schools. Parents need to kind of know their rights a lot more to recognise, what it is that you should be allowed to do. And we need to be writing to our politicians and our MPs to let them know more about, home education and why it is a good thing. I just pray that things are better. I pray, for the family that are going into home education 2025, that all will be well and that you'll still be able to have some of the freedoms that I experienced with my children. Now, like I said, my name is Sophia. I'm the 1 in 1.3. I have my own online membership where I'm trying to support families. I have my own curriculum at 1.3 curriculum also, which is a flashcard-based curriculum. I've taken away all the teacher jargon to help you to teach your children at home as well. So if you're interested in joining that community, click on the link down below, because we have got a half price discount at the moment before the new year starts. But I genuinely am worried for families out there, and I will be praying for you with your decision to home educate your children. I will be following and watching the news very, very closely, watching the legality of this very, very closely to see if this legislation gets passed or not. And I will be trying to set up more videos again to support you and help you and keep you informed about what is going on. Thank you so much for listening to my rant. I hope I was able to answer some of the questions that you might have had for yourself also. And yeah, let's just keep going and just doing the best that we can. Leave a comment down below, like and subscribe, and I'll speak to you soon. God bless, bye.